Network. Montana This Morning continues on Montana's News Leader.
Congress could hold its first vote today on a compromise to fund the government and avoid another shutdown. But President Trump says he's not happy about the deal. I'm Mark Liverman with what he could still do to fully fund his border wall.
Also ahead, a special report on drug trafficking in Montana and how Montana Highway Patrol troopers are using a special tool to stop the drug trade. Coming up, a device that may not be high-tech, but it is highly effective.
Cool story there.
Absolutely true. We'll have that in just a moment.
Matt joins us now. We were just saying a moment ago, it's just so refreshing to have not absolutely frigid temperatures for a couple of mornings
right,
here.
Not have to check in with somebody to let them know I'm going to my car just in case something happens.
Seriously,
I love that.
though, yeah.
Well, we are going to be talking about some snow and maybe some difficult driving conditions by the time you head into the evening and certainly early tomorrow morning. Temperatures this morning fantastic into the 30s, but again, we've had some decent snow already this morning, 4 to 5 inches overnight in West Yellowstone, according to our weather watcher Ken there. And we're probably going to be talking about scattered snow showers throughout the day. A little later start for the Bozeman area, a little earlier start in Butte. We're going to break down how much snow to expect coming up in just a few minutes.
Thank you for that, Matt. It is now 6:30. Our top national story for you now. Congress could hold its first vote today on a compromise deal to fund the government to avoid another shutdown.
President Trump is expected to sign the bill, but as CBS's Mark Liverman reports, he's still looking to fully fund his border wall.
I'm not happy.
President Trump may not be thrilled, but sources tell CBS News that he's likely to sign the bipartisan deal to fund the government.
I don't think you're going to see a shutdown.
The deal provides $1.4 billion for 55 miles of new fencing along the border, far short of the $5.7 billion and 200 miles of wall construction the president has demanded. Democrats dropped their call to cap detention slots for immigrants captured in the U.S.
Beautiful, big, strong wall.
Still determined to fill his signature campaign promise, the president said he'll find other ways to fully fund the border wall.
As we're supplementing things and moving things around, and we're doing things that are fantastic and taking from far less important areas.
And while congressional leaders are urging the president to sign the bill, they are at odds over his ability to find money elsewhere.
Whatever the number is, I don't mind him taking that as a down payment and finding the rest through executive action.
There are great limits on what he can do and cannot do, and we'll have to see what he means.
An executive action by the president would likely face challenges in Congress and federal court. Mark Liverman, CBS News.
Now, last night, the president doubled down on finding that extra money for the wall, tweeting, quote, looking over all aspects, knowing that this will be hooked up with lots of money from other sources, end quote, though President Trump hasn't offered any other specifics.
And a follow-up from a story we've been following this week, and the man involved on Monday night's standoff with police in Belgrade has appeared in court to face his charges.
David Hickson appeared in Gallatin County Justice Court yesterday on felony charges of strangulation and assault with a weapon. Police were called to a business in Belgrade Monday afternoon for a domestic disturbance between Hickson and a woman. The woman was able to escape, but Hickson remained inside. When law enforcement attempted to communicate with him, he would not respond, which resulted in a standoff lasting nearly 8 hours. Hickson was taken into custody without injury around 10:30 on Monday night.
In other news, MTN is investigating Montana's meth epidemic. What might surprise you most is how drugs are getting into the state and where they're coming from.
Drug traffickers from Mexican drug cartels use our highway system as a drug superhighway, and our communities are paying the price. MTN's Andrea Lutz has the first of a two-part series.
Interstate 90, a lifeline for Montana. This artery pumps millions of dollars of commerce into our state. It keeps our economy open for business, but also leaves Montana exposed.
So we know that almost all methamphetamine comes from Mexico. Almost all of our heroin comes across the southern border from Mexico.
And directly from Mexican drug cartels. They use our intricate highway system to get it here, forcing law enforcement to pay attention in a way they never have before.
We can at the very least hurt them where it hurts the most. And that's by taking their product off the road, and that's by taking the criminal proceeds from the sale of that product off the road.
In 2017, the Montana legislature funded a criminal interdiction team, 6 full-time troopers with specialized training in narcotics who conduct high volumes of traffic stops looking for criminal activity.
Drugs are transported in cars, on bus lines, even in our mail. So getting it here is easier than you might think.
Meth is ordered up locally from a drug supplier in Mexico. It's driven through a border crossing into a southern state. Then it can usually go one of 2 ways, from Arizona to Salt Lake City or Denver and directly into Billings, or from California along the west coast through Seattle, along Interstate 90 into Montana, where the distribution often ends, heads farther east, or goes north to Canada. On a brisk fall day, Montana High Patrol Trooper Darvin Mees sets out on shift. His goal for the day is simple: keep Montanans safe. On this day, he's checking speeds on Interstate 90 from Laurel to Lockwood.
My responsibilities are those of any other trooper out here, being crashes, complaints, DUI, so forth.
And if he's lucky, he might even take drugs off the streets.
In addition, though, I have this tool that's used for drug interdiction.
Trooper Mees works with SAR, a drug tracking canine.
You'll notice that she will really get fired up, and she'll probably start barking, and she'll probably get loud. She knows something's going to happen, and she may or may not get out of the car.
Trooper Mees and SAR are often called upon weekly if an officer suspects drugs are in a car. This year they made over 60 drug seizures. Today, he's about to do one more. A mere 2 hours into his shift, Trooper Mees spots a car in Billings with a shattered windshield. He makes a traffic stop, and soon backup arrives.
Jumped out at all of us was that windshield when it went by us.
With only a glance in the windows, he sees drug paraphernalia scattered in the car. Because the occupants allowed Trooper Mees to search, this time SAR wasn't needed.
There was Q-tips and cotton balls for filter, foil with burn marks, lots of foil, and brand new foil, and we end up with 3 addicts and a low-level dealer. I mean, and it's, you know, that was at what time in the afternoon?
However, like many Montana law enforcement officers, he's forced with a tough decision. The Yellowstone County Jail is full. Only violent offenders allowed, which means the drugs are seized and the occupants are free to go.
The next best thing is to get them a court date, get them in front of a judge at some point here in the near future, and hopefully that'll get them down the road to maybe drug court.
These drugs are likely from a Mexican cartel. They're next admitted into evidence to build a case. Scales, foil, scoops, 7 grams of methamphetamine.
Just so crystal white.
Even heroin.
Yeah, that's what they're calling it. Chocolate, yep.
Now, at least, it's off the streets. In Billings, Andrea Lutz, MTN News.
Now we'll dive into part 2 of Montana's drug superhighway coming up tonight at 10.
And 1 year ago tomorrow, 17 people lost their lives when a gunman opened fire on Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida.
That tragedy not only transformed the community, but also the country, giving way to a student-fueled movement dedicated to addressing gun violence. Nicole Killian sat down with some of the founding members of March for Our Lives to see where that effort stands now.
There's not a day that goes by where I'm not thinking about all this.
For the past year, Matt Deitch and Charlie Mursky have channeled their grief into a mission.
Even when March for Our Lives was still in its infant stage, I kind of knew something big was going to happen.
And it did. More than 1 million people around the country demonstrated in the weeks after the Parkland shooting, demanding change.
We took that moment. We have that recognition of what's important and what the issues are, and now it's about mobilizing and organizing every single day.
From road tours and town halls to voter registration drives and lobbying sessions in states and the nation's capital.
The work that we're doing every single day is actively saving lives, and that is by far the biggest accomplishment that we've had.
Do you consider that the Parkland effect?
I've heard it referred to as the Parkland effect, but this is so much more than just Parkland.
According to the Giffords Law Center, 26 states and the District of Columbia enacted 67 new gun control laws in 2018, triple the number from the previous year.
That is really when things change, is when people understand, elected officials understand what the public is demanding.
Enough. We have all had enough.
Recently, survivors and students packed a House committee hearing to push for a background checks bill making its way through Congress.
Is that something you can support?
The problem is it doesn't solve any problem here. We do have universal background checks.
So if that bill were to come over to the Senate today, you would vote no?
Not unless it figures out a way to address the burden that it puts on a seller.
It does kind of shine a light about what kind of work we're going to have to do in the Senate.
But Charlie and Matt say they're committed.
There were 300 plus mass shootings last year, and we're talking about the anniversary of one of them. You could pick any day and it's an anniversary of mass shooting in America. And if that doesn't bother the people watching this, then they are not paying attention.
To a fight they say is just beginning. Nicole Killian, CBS News, Washington.
Now for the one-year anniversary of Parkland, some students are going dark. They say they don't plan to do anything publicly so they can spend some time with their families.
Wow, that's pretty powerful there.
Absolutely true.
Unbelievable. It's been 1 year, and some of the progress that's been made, but some of the progress that we need to see.
Much work to be done.
Absolutely. Yeah. We must take a quick time out. Here's a sneak peek of what's next on Montana This Morning, as well as what's coming up on CBS This Morning at 7.
After 2 days of competition, a top dog has finally been named. I'm Tom Hansen in New York with the crown canine of this year's Westminster Dog Show.
Good morning to you. Ahead on CBS This Morning, we'll talk to the defense attorney for the drug lord known as El Chapo. Hear his plan to appeal the convictions and what it's like to defend the world's most notorious kingpin. And meet the 3 actresses who played Cher in her life story on Broadway and the advice they each received from the legendary singer. Cher had lots to say. See you at 7 o'clock on the dot.